Hey guys, welcome to a video. And today, this is my first ever reaction video, and I'm reacting to Horror Shorts Party 3 True Five Nights at Freddy's Horror Shorts Animated. Let's get right into it and stop talking. Okay. I don't think I've seen this one too. Scary music in the background.
To the people that are fans of Five Nights at Freddy's, the fact that their favorite game could be based on a real tragic event is a little more than a myth. One possibility for the origin of the story out of many others. It's just another edgy piece of the lore, something to dismiss as a made-up connection. However, I believe there's far more to it than just that. I only learned the details of the game because my son is super into it. We talk about games together as a way of bonding, otherwise I never would have played it. However, once I realized that Freddy Fazbear's is obviously a mimic of Chuck E. Cheese, I started listening, and once I got the full story, I was convinced that the whole thing is based on something I experienced. Way back in 1993, I was working at Chuck E. Cheese. It was my crappy part-time job in college where I always got stuck working the late shift. Between the lifeless lighting, the uncanny animatronics, and the weird families, I was always creeped out. However, the thing that would put me most on edge was a coworker of mine who we called Nate. Nate was one of those guys that always seemed angry about something. Every time he looked at me, it was like I'd just kicked his dog or something. And whenever we were around each other, he would harass me. Whether it was splashing dirty dishwater in my face or throwing me under the bus for something he did, he always made my shift 10 times worse. Plus, he got into arguments with the managers every day because he was always late with a BS excuse. Aside from the incident, the most psychotic stunt he ever pulled was already heinous. He had just spent 45 minutes in the bathroom supposedly deep cleaning it. I went in there right after to take a dump while on my break, and he had clearly not done a single thing. What's worse, when I sat down on the toilet, I felt something drip on my head. I looked up and saw an entire turd stuck to the ceiling. I flipped out and reported it to my manager. They logically suspected it was Nate's doing, but he never fessed up to it, and there was no way of proving it. Just from the look on his face, though, I know he did it. Probably as some sick joke, or maybe just because he was sick in the head. Even after he got away with throwing his poop, he held a grudge against me for reporting. The next night, Nate and I worked. We got stuck late after close cleaning up after a busy day. At some point, Nate disappeared, but that wasn't unusual. A few minutes later, while I was sweeping around the stage area, I was walking by one of the big Chuck E. Cheese suits, when all of a sudden, it grabbed me. I punched the head of the suit right off, and who else was wearing it but Nate? Laughing at me, some sort of comedic genius. Both me and Nate got sent home early over the commotion. The managers must have had a talk afterwards, because the next day, as soon as Nate showed up for work, the owner fired him on the spot. Of course, Nate flipped his lid and screamed his head off at the entire store. He almost started a fist fight, but then somebody yelled that they were calling the cops, and Nate finally stopped throwing a tantrum and stormed out, slamming the door so hard it cracked the glass. After that, it seemed like I was free from Nate's constant tormenting. For a glorious few months, that was the case, until he showed up again. I was working at the food bar when I spotted Nate staring at me from across the restaurant. He was pretending to play an arcade game, but the entire time he was glaring right at me. I tried to ignore it, but he was stalking the restaurant for hours, and every time I looked over at him, he was already looking at me. Then, he came up to me in order to shake, and he was just as antagonistic as he always was.
This better be perfect. You hear me? If you're gonna steal my job, you better be good at it.
Nate, you never even worked front of house. You never made shakes.
Shut up! How would you like to get fired over some bull crap?
I had to roll my eyes and sigh, but I was hiding the fact that I was scared. There was something even more unhinged about him then. Eventually, I went on break, and like usual, my first move was to go to the bathroom for a long dump. I soon realized I wasn't alone in the bathroom. There was someone in the stall next to me, laughing like a psycho. I recognized that voice. It wasn't just any creep. It was Nate. Every day I spent working with him came rushing back, and I was suddenly terrified of being alone with him. I didn't make a sound. I was glad he left the bathroom after a bit, and I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing I could get back to business as usual, except there was nothing usual about that day. A few minutes later, I heard a loud pop from the restaurant, followed by screaming. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, but I wanted to convince myself it was just balloons popping. But then I heard
No way.
it again and again and again. Despite this, I continued to delude myself into thinking it was just balloons, and I stayed put. Out of nowhere, somebody burst into the bathroom. I watched their legs as they walked up to my door.
It smells like shit! What the hell did you eat?
They kicked the door with full force.
What do you want? Stop it!
Despite my pleas, they continued to kick the stall. I knew they would break it down before long, so I panicked and reached into the toilet bowl. I pulled out the log I just laid and lobbed it over the door.
Ah! Everything is brown! You stupid idiot!
I must have nailed him right in the face, because it was enough to get him to leave me alone. Afterwards, I finished up and cleaned off my hands, then left the bathroom to go back to work. Unfortunately, once I stepped back into the restaurant, I saw nothing but catastrophe. People were either hiding under tables and chairs or laid out on the floor. I had no idea what was going on, but it had been going on the whole time I was in the bathroom. Nate did all of it, and had just left, but the cops were just showing up. Later, I found out that Nate sought revenge for getting fired and came back to take it out on a few employees. He was arrested not long after at his mother's apartment. I was lucky to be in the bathroom when he did it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be alive right now. Knowing all this, and from what I've been told about Five Nights at Freddy's, the parallels are just uncanny to me. I believe this is what the story of the game is based on.
Heck no!
The story was inspired by a tragic incident that most people believe to be the origin of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. It was an incident that happened in 1993 when a man named Nathan Dunlap, a former employee of the Chuck E. Cheese restaurant, was frustrated about being fired 5 months prior. His revengeful attack left a total of 4 deceased and 1 critically injured. The correlation behind the incident in Five Nights at Freddy's is that there had been many underlying resemblances. Like, for instance, the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria's resemblance to Chuck E. Cheese, and how the setting of the game encompasses the year of the crime, 1993. There are many more similarities to the victims and the characters in the game itself online, but here was just a handful that summarized the deadly events.
Okay, guys. We are going to watch shows another day, but not today. So, yes, subscribe, and go subscribe to them right here. My Horror Shorts Party. I think these are personally my new favorite YouTubers, honestly. This is their member one. This is their newest video. Go check it out, subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.